will give us a few tips.
Hello. All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number on your original email. Members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be muted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name that you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is public comment. We do have a registrant. It looks like it might have been in error. It is Karen Manion, 1114 Starlight Drive, Madison, support not wishing to speak. So it's unclear what Karen might have been referencing. The next item is communications disclosures, recusals. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? I'm looking for raised hands. I see none, so it appears there are no disclosures or recusals. In terms of communications, we did get an email in regard to the Annex Group's proposed affordable housing site at Wheeler Road and Packers Avenue, raising some concerns. Anyone can see the communication by going to Legistar number 61417. That's Legistar 61417, and it has to do with the affordable housing site at Wheeler Road and Packers Avenue. Next on the agenda, we have the minutes for the July 27th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. I see no raised hands, therefore the minutes pass unanimously. Next on the agenda is the schedule of upcoming meetings. We have a regular meeting on August 24th. That's our next meeting. That will be followed by a meeting on September 14th. Since we are not yet at 5:45, I will turn to Kevin Furco, who is helping us out tonight as secretary for the commission because Ms. Stouter is away. So, Mr. Furco.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to touch on a few things for this evening's Secretary's report. First, I just wanted to note that an appeal was filed late last week regarding the Plan Commission's actions at 126 Langdon Street. A legislative file is in the process of being created, and that will be available for viewing shortly. And an appeal for 126 Langdon has been filed. Next, I wanted to summarize just the recent Common Council actions of projects that the body has seen recently. I wanted to note that the redevelopment in the 500 block of West Washington was approved at the last council meeting with the Plan Commission's recommended conditions, as were the redevelopments in the 1800 block of Packers Avenue, 8355 Mansion Hill Avenue. That residential building complex was approved subject to the Plan Commission's recommendations. And I also wanted to note that at the last Plan Commission, the Common Council approved the third substitute ordinance regarding the bird glass text amendment to the zoning. Looking ahead to the next couple of Plan Commission meetings, just highlight some of the items that'll be before you. On the August 24th meeting, the Plan Commission will be seeing a development at 5622 East Park Boulevard. This was submitted earlier this spring, but was referred for a variety of reasons. It's now a rezoning to the CCT district, and the applicant has made some modifications and some adjustments to allow for the future development of a roundabout adjacent to the site. That is a development that has 306 apartment units and about 4,300 square feet of commercial square. Also, at the August 24th meeting, there are some referrals that are noted on tonight's consent agenda, including that are noted in the agenda. Also wanted to note that there are neighborhood development plan and official map amendments to the Marsh Road area Plan Commission will be seeing next week. And subject to review next week by the Landmarks Commission, if approved and moved on from the Landmarks Commission, the Plan Commission would also see a redevelopment proposal at 817 Williamson Street. Again, that's subject to the action of the Landmarks Commission, scheduled to look at their aspect of that request next Monday. Moving ahead to the September 14th, there is a redevelopment of the corner of Cottage Grove Road and Monona Drive across from Atwood Avenue. This is a redevelopment of the former Ace Hardware store and associated shopping center and an auto repair business at the corner. And the proposal is to demolish those three buildings and construct a 4-story mixed-use building with approximately 78 apartments and 2,500 square feet of retail space. There's also another rezoning on Cottage Grove Road on the other side of the interstate to rezone from ag to suburban employment. So those are some of the projects that you'll be seeing in the coming meetings for the Plan Commission. That concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Furco. We will stand informal until the public hearing, which will be at 5:45. Thank you. It is now 5:45, so we will resume our meeting, taking up the consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. These items are placed onto a consent agenda, and they are addressed at the beginning of the public hearing section of our meeting. The other thing that we take up with the other public hearing items on the consent agenda are those items to be referred. The first item on the consent agenda is agenda item 4, Legistar 60000, consideration of a demolition permit and consideration of 3 conditional use permits at 2649 East Springs Drive, 17th Alder District. The second item on our consent, and that is for referral to no specific date. The next item on our consent agenda is agenda item 6, Legistar 61062, located at 2020 Vilas Avenue, 13th Alder District, which is consideration of a conditional use permit. The next item on the consent agenda is agenda item 9 for referral. Consideration of zoning changes for property located at 4000 through 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue in the 12th Alder District. That is to be considered also with agenda item 10. Agenda item 9 is Legistar 60914. And 10 is 60683. These are to be referred to September 14th at the request of the applicant. Agenda item 10 is approving the preliminary plat of the Ramish Farm development on property addressed as 4000 through 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue, 12th Alder District. The last item on the consent agenda is for referral, agenda item 14, to be referred to August 24th at the request of the applicant and District Alder. It is Legistar 61389, creating section 28022 and 00459 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at properties located at 6003 through 6067 Gemini Drive, 3rd Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan and creating section 28.022 through 00460 to amend a planned development district to approve a specific implementation plan. Are there any requests for separation? I am looking for raised hands. Seeing no requests for separation, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the referrals as you've indicated.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 2, Legistar 61552, approving the amendment to the project plan for tax incremental district 39 Stoughton Road, 16th Alder District, and agenda item 3, Legistar 61553, approving the amendment to the project plan for Tax Incremental District 42, Wingra, 13th and 14th Alder District. Mr. Dan Rolfs from the Real Estate Department will be giving us a briefing on these two agenda items. Mr. Rolfs.
Good evening. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Rolfs. I am the Community Development Project Manager in the Office of Real Estate Services in the Economic Development Division for the city. There are two items before you tonight for public hearing. The first is TID 39, a project plan amendment, and then the second would be TID 42, project plan amendment there. These two items are tied together. If you've had a moment to look through the amended project plans, you'll note that the meat and potatoes of both of these is a donation of incremental revenue from TID 39 to TID 42. The project costs that are newly identified in TID 39 are a small amount of land acquisition, the creation and funding of a small cap TIF program in TID 39, in and adjacent to TID 39, and a donation of funds to TID 42 to begin investing in South Madison in advance of the dissolution of the town of Madison. The town of Madison, as I'm sure many of you are aware, will dissolve on October 31st, 2022. That is a very brief overview of the TID 39 project plan amendment. Moving on to TID 42, the project plan amendment here is primarily done to allocate those dollars that are coming from TID 39 into TID 42 and identify where those dollars will be spent. Primarily, they will be going towards land acquisition. There's a property at 1810 South Park Street that the city is working to acquire, assuming approval of these project plan amendments. Then there is an additional $200,000 allocated to assist in the Urban League in the creation of a program that will increase home ownership among lower income Black families and families of color. And then there is a small portion set aside for a long-range study to look at South Madison. Our goal is to invest substantial dollars into South Madison after the town of Madison is dissolved. And as staff, we would like to ensure that our dollars are impacting the residents that live in South Madison to ensure that we are doing the best job that we can to deal with issues of displacement, gentrification, and things like that. That's a very brief overview of those two project plan amendments. I would note that neither amendment changes any boundaries, does not add or subtract any parcels. It simply adjusts the overall dollars that are allocated within each district. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rolfs. We do not have any registrants for this agenda item, so I will open and close the public hearing. And I will go to then questions of staff. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Hi, Dan Ross. Nice to see you.
Hello, hello.
I have a question. You said your last comment basically says that no boundary changes. And I pulled up the map for TID 42. And I guess the half-mile rule kind of gets at the answer. But in the future, is the mayor and staff looking at creating a new TIF district that would capture more of the incoming area, as well as the parts of the south side on the other side of Wenger Creek and the railroad?
That is something that is being contemplated, yes.
Thank you. In the meantime, the half-mile rule, we can reliably hope that the Joint Review Board will allow projects that are that might be in that area.
That is the goal. Yeah.
Great, thank you. My only question right now.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? I see no raised hands, so I would be looking for a motion on these two agenda items. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will move that the Plan Commission forward the amended project plan for TIF District 39 and the amended TIF District 42 to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Seconded by Alder Rummel. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
All that I think this is a great opportunity to place some dollars where we need them in the future redevelopment of South Madison. So I think this is really a good effort that staff is putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion? I am seeing no raised hands. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Not seeing a raised hand, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Rolfs, for being here and briefing us. The next item on the agenda is Agenda Item 5, Legistar 61061, located at 416 South Park Street, 13th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district to convert an existing tavern into a nightclub, and consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district to establish an outdoor eating area. And we have a presentation by Sydney Prusak of the Plan Department. Ms. Prusak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Plan Commission. In order to host live music, the applicant proposes to establish a nightclub in a building that is currently used as a tavern. The applicant also proposes to establish an outdoor eating and drinking area at the rear of the building. While music will occasionally be amplified during indoor performances, there will be no amplified music outside. As proposed, the hours of operation will remain the same as they are for the existing tavern, Tuesday to Sunday closing at 12:30 a.m. The applicant anticipates that music performances will end at least a half hour before closing. I will note that there was a typo in the staff report referencing a 12:30 p.m. closing time, which is just correct. So staff believes that all the applicable conditional use standards can be found met. There are a variety of commercial uses along South Park Street, and the outdoor deck is an existing condition. And given the fact that outdoor amplified sound is prohibited, staff does not believe that the conversion from a tavern to a nightclub for the purpose of adding live entertainment will have significant impact on the surrounding properties. Furthermore, staff believes that all the supplemental regulations for both nightclubs and outdoor eating areas associated with food and beverage establishments are also met. Prior to this meeting, staff received a few letters voicing concerns over noise and general congestion, especially with the addition of live music. Those comments are included in the legislative file for your reference. The Planning Division has added 3 conditions of approval to help mitigate these concerns, and I'll read them as follows. There shall be no outdoor amplified sound or musical performances outdoors. The outdoor eating and drinking area shall not be occupied by customers later than 10 p.m. And lastly, all exterior doors shall remain closed during musical performances to minimize sound spillover to adjacent parcels. Considering all of this, the Planning Division recommends that the Plan Commission find that the approval standards for conditional uses are met and approve the request to convert an existing tavern into a nightclub and establish an outdoor eating area on a property zone traditional shopping street at 416 South Park Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prusak. We do have some registrants. I will open the public hearing. The first one is Matthew Kaiser, 109 Rosemary Avenue, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Kaiser.
Hi, yeah. I'm the owner. I was just here more available for your questions and whatnot. I did see a couple of the complaints or concerns. Quite frankly, I don't know that they're very. I understand the concerns. I don't know that some of the complaints are very valid. We've been there for 10 years and we've never have been addressed with any issues. We make a point of trying to be an asset to the community and cleaning up. So I'm not sure what to make of particularly Mr. Werner's email. But I do understand the concerns of the other neighbors. And to be quite honest, the former owner had been running or doing some jazz and low-key bluegrass and stuff there, which is all I'm really trying to continue. And we'd never had any complaints with noise or anything else like that in the past.
Does that conclude your testimony?
I mean, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next registrant is Moose J. Werner, 1618 Middleton Street, Middleton, Wisconsin, opposed and wishing to speak. Mr. Werner. Jesse, you are muted.
I don't find any person with that name.
Okay, we don't seem to have that registrant in our queue. So I will ask, are there any questions of Mr. Kleiser? Commissioner Sundquist, did you have a question? No? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I do have a question for Mr. Kleiser. Could you just describe your, I see you have a rear outdoor deck now, and that's going to be become an official eating and drinking space. Can you just describe the current situation outdoors compared to what's proposed?
I mean, do you have that plans, I guess, available? Right. It's just a small fenced in area. I've presently got one picnic table in a corner, and that's basically it. And I've moved one picnic table out to create more space for the distancing stuff. So
would capacity change for that outdoor area then?
I don't anticipate it would, no.
Okay. It seems reasonable to me, but I just wanted to make sure I understood what would happen post-COVID also, when distancing isn't required, and you anticipate that there'll be 2 picnic tables there maximum.
Yeah, 2 picnic tables, and then there's a couple of just freestanding chairs with little I don't know, things that you can set your drink on and such.
Mm-hmm. And currently people are allowed to go back there and eat and drink. Is that true?
Well, that was my understanding until I heard that that Brian, the former owner, had never fully completed a conditional use application or whatnot. I did apply for like the streetery extension to throw a couple tables beyond in the parking lot.
And were you able to get that?
Yes.
And you haven't had, and that's in operation now?
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't had any complaints related to that?
No, I haven't heard any complaints, honestly, aside from this email that tagged my alder brought to my attention. And then I saw these 2 additional concerns. like it said, one of them is familiar with us. We've been there. I've been working for Brian for 10 years. He just stepped away and I took over, but I don't really plan on changing much. And I mean, even I had brought up that email of Mr. Werner's to him, and neither of us have met the individual or had any contact with him. So we find it a little unusual that he has these concerns or complaints. We make a point of trying to be very responsible and conscientious of the neighborhood with everything we do. And it seems like some of his complaints, might relate to the business that preceded us, but it's been 10 years. So I don't know how to address that. As far as we know, we've never had any issues. I don't know.
Thanks. And just to verify, there'll be no amplified or unamplified music outside, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. Can the applicant explain how much of the proposed back patio will take up the parking lot? It's just not clear to me when I look at the locator map, which looks like there's a whole drive aisle behind all the properties, how much of the space that you would be using. Would there still be parking lot back there for anybody's use?
There is. So if you're looking at this image that you guys have up right now, I'm looking at it just to the left of that picnic table. It's a wooden fence, right, that contains the whole area. Just to the left is a couple parking spots for the barber shop next to us, and then across or looking beyond where the fenced-in area ends, there's 3 parking spots of our own. And there's, I guess maybe you don't have it. I did submit, maybe it was for the streetery thing, an outdoor plan that shows, I guess, better representation of the footprint of it. But it's I would say that the parking lot or the parking spaces we're only slightly wider, I guess I should say, or longer than the parking spots, and there's 20 or 30 feet beyond us to the fence line in the parking lot in that space. I can email real quick picture of the footprint, I guess, of the parking lot. I have it ready. I just thought you guys had it.
Thank you. It's just hard for me to tell from your drawing.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not.
No, I don't mean for you to feel bad. I just don't really have the answer by looking at them.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So you'll send that to Sydney and then she can share it.
Yeah, here, let me see. 1 second. I had that one up. Image 202. Okay.
Okay, have you forwarded that, Mr. Kleiser, to Ms. Prusak?
I am in the process of it.
Great.
One moment. I apologize. I didn't have the picture labeled. I had to look at make sure I'm sending you the right one. It says it's adding an attachment, and all right, it should be sent. And then it would be the third image I sent. Would have the kind of an idea of what it looks like outside right now.
Has that arrived, Ms. Prusak? I have unmuted you, Sydney.
Hi. Yeah, it's arrived, but I'm just loading it. It's still attached into it's within my email, so let me export that from my email.
So will you do a shared screen of that?
Yes.
You see, it's that third image that doesn't have a proper label or name on. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't have abilities to.
No, that looks good. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions after seeing this, Alder Rummel?
No, it's very helpful. Thank you. It looks like the parking lot still remains. I guess what prompted me to ask was the one email about monitoring the parking lot. So can you talk about what your plans will be now that you'll have this sort of out? Will there be access or an exit from this area to the parking lot? How does that work?
So there's a door that I can latch and lock from the interior, kind of at the L corner, if you see on there. I and other employees are in and out to check and bus tables and whatnot when people are out there, just so we're keeping an eye on things. And I make a point of cleaning up and checking everything at the end of the night. I'm always the last one to leave. Other than that, I mean, it's been there, and it's generally a low key kind of thing that people just sit out there and, if the weather's nice, have their beer, or, for the smokers and whatnot.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel, does that do it for you?
I just want to know about the monitoring and program for the parking lot now that the business is sort of coming outside.
I mean, we just check with regularity what's going on out there. Are you asking whether we should have a camera or something?
No, I'm just asking what your plan is. Thank you.
Yeah, no, just to regularly, I mean, we keep tabs on the customers. I mean, I find that, if the opportunity presents itself, it's good to go out there and, check on them. If they need anything, I can bring it to them instead of having them come in and out. Always clearing dishes and trash and whatnot, from pizza and whatnot. So it's just regularly being attentive to it. And I mean, during day hours and in cooler weather, sometimes we'll have the door open so I can hear what's going on. It obviously gets shut as the evening goes on. But it's small, and we try to keep an eye on it.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel, did you have any further questions?
I did have one more question based on Mr. Kleiser's comment about the door being open. Is the door open when music events or music is being performed inside or played inside?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
I channel stuff in my own neighborhood.
Good question. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, just getting back to the site plan that you showed in the parking lot, the back of the building. The plan show what we're approving are two picnic tables, and what you just showed us on that kind of schematic was it looks like an expanded version, maybe in the future, that you may want of 4 additional picnic tables. I'm assuming we're not approving that. We're just approving your 2 picnic tables. And I guess the question I have is are the 2 areas where the area where the 2 picnic tables are, is that fenced? I think you indicated it was.
Yeah, so that boxed in area is existing fenced in. What you're seeing is what I submitted to the streetery application. So yeah, it's all controlled, and that was all that was. I was the conditional use outdoor application.
Okay.
I had talked to Colin, and he said in the future, if I was hoping to have this as like a seasonal type of extension, since I've invested a little bit of time, but that's not what we're doing now, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You're welcome.
Any other questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, thank you.
Okay, and we did get one additional registrant. Ben Gottlieb, 402 South Park Street, Madison, neither support nor oppose and wishing to speak. Mr. Gottlieb.
Oh,
Yeah, it's all
can you hear me?
controlled, and that was all.
Yes.
Sorry, I have two broadcasts, and I'm not sure which one. There we go. Okay, let me close the other
In
one.
the future, if I was hoping to have this as like a seasonal time.
I'm sorry.
Extension.
Just take a sec.
Invested a little time.
So I own the adjacent properties at 402 through 410 South Park. They have they're mixed use, commercial on the first floor, and then 4 apartments above. I also own the apartment building behind at 913, 915 Vilas, which also has 4 units in it. So I'm quite concerned about the sound. I've known Matt for years. He's a good guy. And it's a big concern for me because I don't want my tenants complaining. I guess what I'd like to address is there any kind of decibel threshold for sound that will be allowed outside the measurement that you guys won't exceed? Hello?
Yes, there is. That is not a question. We are not open for discussion right now.
Oh, sorry.
So go ahead with your testimony. You do have 3 total minutes.
Okay, so I'm just concerned about the volume level outside and how traffic will be controlled. I'm not sure what capacity is there. How traffic will be controlled, people going in, people coming out, noise in the parking lot. It sounds like it's going to be a noisier place than it currently is, and it's a concern of mine. So I'll resign the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gottlieb. Any other questions of either of the registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we will go to questions of staff. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, just maybe to see if we can answer the last person's question about decibel levels, maybe staff could address what the ruling that works or doesn't work.
Ms. Prusak or Mr. Furco?
I'll jump in, and if Sydney has anything to follow up with, she can certainly do that. As far as the condition, the city does have an ordinance requirement that there's a maximum decibel level at the property line. That's something that is generally intended for fixed point sources of noise, for example, air conditioning, compressors, and other things that are more steady in terms of noise they produce. As far as when we're dealing with outdoor seating areas, I can't think of any outdoor eating areas that have conditioned upon a specific building or a decibel level. It's been discouraged by our building inspection from an enforcement standpoint of using that as a threshold for outdoor eating area or and other points of sound that are I guess potentially more fluid and have changing levels compared to, as I said, fixed points of sound. So generally, our approach has been not to have conditions of approval. There are items in ordinance that do set a maximum threshold, however, that can be enforced by city buildings.
Second question: if this goes forward, and before I ask that question, another question. My understanding from the testimony is that there's already some seating out there based on the COVID era period. Okay. So, have you heard complaints? Do you know if there have been complaints to the city about noise during that period?
I am not aware if any complaints have been submitted.
Okay. So,
are you aware of any? Could you unmute yourself, please, Ms. Prusak?
Yeah, I am not aware of any complaints.
Okay, just stay unmuted, please, until the end of this. Thank you.
now, I mean, that doesn't mean there never could be, or that maybe there have been to the police or something that you guys didn't hear about, I guess, right? So, to the last testimony, if this should go forward and there is a complaint in the future, we have continuing jurisdiction, right? And we could address it by revoking the right to have the outdoor seating, or cutting it off earlier, or any other sorts of things like that.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, Sydney.
No, that's correct. Yeah, this can, if there are complaints, this can come back to the Plan Commission for further review.
Okay, last thing. I've enjoyed a beverage while listening to live music in the Mason before, and the applicant, I think, referred to this, that the previous owner may have operated it with live music, but maybe wasn't allowed it with his tavern category. Can you speak to that? Whether is this like sort of fixing a problem that is bringing the regulation to match the practice, or just what?
I can't speak to what was previously going on there. I have to admit that this was not a project that I reviewed, but in talking with Colin Punt, who prepared the staff report, and looking at the information online, they did receive their entertainment license on June 2nd from the ALRC, so that allows the live music. So now they are in compliance, and that's what put them into the nightclub category. I can't speak to what the approvals or lack of approvals were, but now getting approved as a nightclub will be in line with their entertainment license for live music.
Okay, but this was when I was there was a couple of years ago, and were they out of compliance by having live music at that point?
Yeah, if they did not have an entertainment license, then they were not allowed to have live music.
Okay. It's a new owner, so hopefully maybe that is an oversight that wouldn't happen again, but it is the kind of thing that we could, we take into account, like how people comply with rules. So I guess, again, with the continuing jurisdictions, these are the kind of things that we should keep in mind should there be problems down the road, should this go forward. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sundquist.
And Terrell, the continuing jurisdiction also includes the nightclub activity as well. Is that correct, staff?
Correct.
So if there were any complaints on the decibel levels or the loud music, if they started playing rock music rather than country western, I don't know, less volume, then we could the neighbors could file a complaint, and the Plan Commission could consider that in the future. Okay.
Correct.
So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. Ms. Prusek, did you discuss with the applicant at all about the type of fencing? I saw on the map there was temporary street area fencing, but would there be more of a permanent, like wooden fence or some other? It wasn't clear in the conditions if that was addressed.
Again, I'm pretty new to this project, as Colin is at another neighborhood meeting tonight. But I believe that if there is district running screening, since this is a commercial district, if there is a residential district surrounding the property, and it turns out that there's not, so there's no requirement for that 6 to 8 foot fence that is typically applied to projects that abut residentially zoned properties, but everything, according to Colin's staff report, is zoned TSS. So I'm unaware of what type of fencing or how tall it is, but there's no requirements by zoning.
I mean, I guess when we heard from one of the earlier testimony about somebody concerned about their tenants, were those tenants that live above one of the adjacent Park Street? Because it looks like there are residential properties surrounding this area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there may be residential properties, but it still has the commercial zoning, the TSS zoning.
Well, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but that's what I live in on Williamson Street, and a lot of times I personally would have questions out a backyard thing that was close to people's residences. So that was why I asked about like whether there's any kind of soundproofing. So it might be something that the applicant might want to consider if they're not being required to do that if they hear complaint. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Prusak, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but from the kind of crude drawings that we've seen, especially the last one that we saw, and the discussion, I got the impression that there is an existing fenced-in area with a wooden fence that has a picnic table, maybe, and maybe something else, and that there is a fenced-in area because Mr. Kleiser referred to a gate that currently opens up to the parking lot area where the streetery location is. So do you know if that's the case? I get the impression that the area that we're discussing is already fenced in, and the streetery component that's in the parking lot and doesn't have a fence is a separate issue. Do you know if that's correct?
That's what it looked like. I can't, but that's my impression too. That the tables for the streetery were outside the proposed outdoor eating area. But I guess when I was referring to or trying to answer Alder Rummel's question, I don't know the details of that fence or how high, or there are no specific requirements for the height on that fence.
Okay, thank you.
I do not see any other raised up. Now there is. Commissioner Solheim.
I was just going to make a motion if we're
okay
ready at that point. So I would move to find that the approval standards for the conditional uses are met and approve the request to convert the existing tavern into an outdoor eating and drinking area and include the conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Solheim, did you wish to speak any further to your motion?
Well, I have had some experience in the interior and exterior space of the Mason, so I am familiar with their operations and how the exterior area is fenced in. And I think that while there are concerns from the neighbors, it has been operating in a similar fashion recently. And I think that the conditions should help address those concerns, and it can always be reviewed again later if there are complaints.
Okay, thank you. Alder Evers.
Hi, everybody. I reached out to the Greenbush Neighborhood Association folks to see if there were ongoing concerns about this business, and I received no complaint. My understanding, what the applicant is trying to do here is to bring the current practice into compliance, which is something we want to do when a new owner takes over, not to continue just skirting around the rules and trying to get by, but to come into compliance. So I would urge you to support the efforts of the Mason to continue with bluegrass and jazz music and the way that they have, but do so legally, and to make it available for them to use this outdoor space, which really seems to be quite minimal. And they seem also to be very committed to their neighbors, to being good neighbors. So again, I gave the Neighborhood Association every opportunity to rally in opposition. They would have none of it. They were quite supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any other comments before we come to a vote? And again, I will be assuming unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda are agenda items 7 and 8, which are related, and we will be considering those together. Agenda item 7 is Legistar 60907, creating section 28.022 through 00442 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 133 East Lakeside Street, 13th Alder District, from Suburban Employment District to Traditional Employment District. And agenda item 8, Legistar 60480, revised, located at 133 East Lakeside Street, 13th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a fraternal lodge, consideration of a conditional use in the Suburban Employment Zoning District for multifamily dwellings, and consideration of a conditional use in the Suburban Employment District for dwelling units in a mixed-use building to construct a 4-story mixed-use building with approximately 1,250 square feet of commercial space and 66 apartments. We do have a presentation by staff. Ms. Prusak.
Actually, I'll take this one. Chair.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, no,
Mr.
that's okay.
Furco.
Thank you. Good evening once again. Our next two projects, a few different related requests. The project before you is, as the chair mentioned, now a 4-story building with approximately 66 residential units, and 1,250 square feet of residential areas, and 19 surface parking stalls. The proposal is also includes a conditional use and a rezoning request, and I will follow up with that when I discuss staff's recommendation. Staff believes that the project is consistent with the adopted neighborhood plan. The most specific recommendations for this site are the South Madison Neighborhood Plan that talk about the ultimate redevelopment of this site and recommend up to a 4-story mixed-use office or commercial building, as noted in the staff report. Staff believes that the conditional use standard for dwelling units in a mixed-use building can be met. I wanted to provide just a little bit of history on this site because there are 2 requests before you and perhaps somewhat of an unusual recommendation from staff regarding those. Before you have the demolition request for the existing VFW building. You have the conditional use for dwelling units in a mixed-use building. And you have a zoning map amendment that was requesting rezoning from the Suburban Employment District to the Traditional Employment District. That request is believed no longer to be necessary, the rezoning request. During the review process, the applicant has made significant revisions to the proposal. Previously, it was submitted as a 5-story building with over 100 dwelling units. And the applicant, based on feedback from neighbors and then from the alder, have reduced the size and scale of the building down to a 4-story building with the 66 units as proposed. Therefore, the rezoning request to the TE district is no longer necessary to facilitate the development of this project. So as far as the recommendation, staff recommends that the Plan Commission find the demolition and conditional use standards are met, approve those requests. As it relates to the zoning map amendment request, staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommend that that item be placed on file without prejudice and forward that recommendation. Staff is available to answer questions after. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furco. We do have a couple of registrants on this item, so I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, 7601 University Avenue, Middleton, Wisconsin, support wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Mr. Burrow. You have 3 minutes.
All right, good evening. Thank you for your time in reviewing this proposal. As was just presented by Kevin Furco, this is the culmination of a lot of interaction between the developers and the neighborhood and the alder for this redevelopment of the VFW site. What you see in front of you on the screen is the layout of the John Nolan corridor, and our site is at the end or the upper end of the screen in the red box, which is the current site. So it's basically at the culminating end of the more commercial side of the John Nolan corridor. Next slide, please. So we have some various views walking you down the corridor, basically to set the context of how this building would sit along the John Nolan corridor and fits into the overall commercial aspect of this main artery and gateway down to the city. Next slide, please. Another view where you can see the building coming into the foreground. It's the white box shown in the middle of the screen on the left-hand side of the railroad corridor. Next slide. Here's the context photo showing the exact site then. So we're nested between a commercial office building towards the north, and then the city-owned property is towards the south, which are 3 stories in size to the north, and then 1.5 to 2 story to the south. And our site is in the middle. And you can see the dense tree line to the west of our property, which separates us from the existing residential property on Colby Street. Next slide, please. So here's a view where we have superimposed our proposed design, which is now, again, a 4-story building, stepping down to 3 stories at the closest proximity to Lakeside Street and the immediate adjacent property. Next slide, please. Here's another view looking up towards the John Nolan corridor and downtown city again. Next slide. So what we're proposing to do is a 4-story building, step down to 3-story with a small commercial space located in the upper left-hand corner of about 1,250 square feet, and then an outdoor large plaza area, which is covering over the existing or the proposed parking garage located below. So there's surface parking available to the commercial users and visitors to the apartments, as all the entries are now located off of East Lakeside Street. Then the drive to the underground parking is located on the southern end, which leads you to 70 underground stalls. Next slide, please. Here's the overall landscape plan where we are proposing to utilize and save all the existing vegetation all on the western side of the property to serve as effective screening to neighboring properties to the west. Next slide. The overall basement layout is shown here with 70 parking stalls with sufficient bike parking shown in the middle. Next slide. Overall first floor layout where we've got the commercial space in the upper end and the main lobby adjacent to that. Then it's a mixture of studios, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments throughout the rest of the building. Next slide, please. Sorry. Here's the overall layout of the upper floor where you can see the community room located on the north end with an outdoor gathering area for all the residents to be able to access to the key views looking over the lake and also down to downtown Madison. Next slide, please.
That concludes your time, Mr. Burrow. The next registrant is Bob Stone, 1101 Colby Street, Madison, neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Mr. Stone.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So a couple of different aspects I wanted to cover, and I'll be quick. This site has been traditionally viewed for decades for development by the city. It was classified as commercial for decades, reclassified to employment, which is usually used for districts, but they do give examples like in the comprehensive plan of a hospital. Whether or not the traditional employment zoning will be put through, it was asked for. And traditional employment zoning is a more restrictive category of employment. It states clearly in its definition that residential is a secondary use, not primary. This project is referred to as mixed use. It has 66 dwelling units and 1 commercial space that I believe was a condition of first refusal by the VFW for purchase of the facility. Both in the comprehensive plan, the South Madison plan, stress the need for family housing. Affordable family housing is paramount, with special mention made of housing near schools. There are 2 schools within blocks of this development. Despite asking the developer for more family housing, there are 8 2-bedroom apartments planned. The rest is studio, 1 bedroom, possibly with a den. The proposed rents for these units put them outside the realm of affordable, and there's no option for ownership. There's still significant neighborhood concerns about heavily increased traffic flow in the area and how this will impact the already stressed school traffic pattern. there have been some significant requirements made regarding water flow. Very pleased to see that. However, only one drainage flow path is mentioned. There are actually two, one immediately behind the property running to Van Duzen, which already has blockage issues that have not been addressed by the city. The other is on the west side of Sale Street, going the length of Sale Street. That does empty into Ringer Creek. The hydrology of this whole area is very complex, especially at the corner the property is located at. In the DNR surface water flow map, it's very clear. Recent flooding, a couple of years ago showed how fragile this area is. Large sections at the end of Sale Street of the bike path located there, several were closed for long periods of time. Finally, I asked the commission to consider an additional issue. Planning is often centered around generally used numbers of needing to provide housing for an additional 70,000 residents by 2040. Indeed, the comprehensive plan states this right near the beginning. Perhaps it's my naivety, but the only true reference I can find for this number is in the 2013 report compiled by the city, or for the city by the UW's Fine Applied Population Lab. The numbers used seem to misrepresent that report. The report clearly states that the overall growth is based on an increase and the effect of an aging population decrease. The net increase is projected to be 40,000 residents, not 70. The growth period is projected to end in 2025. It declines after that point.
Mr. Stone, that concludes your available testimony time. Thank you. I will open, there's a couple other people who do not wish to speak but are registered and available to answer questions. Justin Zampardi, 999 Furrier Drive, Madison, support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions, representing Avanti Properties and Veerbecker. The next registrant is Chris Armstrong, Auburn Drive, Fitchburg, Wisconsin, support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Are there questions for any of the registrants? Mr. Sundquist.
Yeah, sort of in response to Mr. Stone's comments, but particularly about traffic and some of the letters in the record about the number of parking stalls and implicitly about traffic. I wonder if the development team considered doing anything to on the transportation demand management side to rein any of that in, and if not, why not?
Mr. Burrow.
We have been working with the city in regards to the traffic flow that this project may provide. What has been proven, though, is that residential housing is the least traffic intense use of the site compared to any commercial use. So the overall volumes will be reduced by this use. Then we are also willing to be supporters of any improvements to the intersection of the East Lakeside Street and John Nolan Drive corridor with regards to pedestrian access to the bus stop. That has been a hot topic within the neighborhood, and we would fully back making improvements to have a more secure crossing for this area. We've had discussions with the city on numerous occasions, and that is intended to be done as part of the John Nolan redevelopment plan, which is forecasted out a couple of years. So again, we would be supporters of that. What we've created right now is having separate accesses. The underground parking is located off the southern end of the site for all the residents to use, and then visitors and commercial users would utilize just the parking lot on the northern side.
Okay. The point about the use is well taken. But what does support mean for the access to the bus stop? Are you dedicating right of way for that? Is there something other than?
It's all city-owned property. So there's existing sidewalks on our side of Sale Street and East Lakeside Street. We would just be in support and helping to encourage the city to provide a safe pedestrian connection across, and then possibly install sidewalk across the railroad corridor connecting to the bus stop on John Nolan Drive.
Okay. And can some of the letters talked about the amount of parking provided. Can you say how you arrived at your number?
I'm aware of the recent letters that have been posted with regards to that we're potentially providing more parking than necessary, but that was
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
yeah. So what brought us to this current number is all the previous meetings with the neighborhood and the concern that we were not providing enough parking or that we'd be causing a shortage of street parking available by use of the commercial space within our building. So when the building was changed in size and mass, reduced to the smaller size of just 4 stories, we were able to allocate more land available for surface parking. So we did so. But we would be willing to work with the city to come up with an appropriate sizing of that lot if it is deemed that it is more than necessary for this area.
Okay, thanks. And then on the Mr. Stone mentioned the drainage. It looks to me like the existing VFW impervious surface is not that much different than what you guys are going to have. But maybe you could speak to that. I don't mean to make your argument for you, but maybe you could just speak to that issue.
Right. It's my understanding that our impervious surface area is actually less than the existing surface parking lot with the VFW property on there. And it's also my understanding that most of that does sheet drain off of the property, whereas we will be containing all of the stormwater that lands on our property and piping it directly into the sewer system as opposed to having it discharge inadvertently into any neighboring properties.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Commissioner Cantrell.
This is a question for the architect, Mr. Burrows. And my question is the parking lot. I think the parking lot is too large for the commercial use that you're providing. For the commercial use, do you have any idea what that will be? It's 1,240 square feet. That's pretty small.
Right. The original desired use for this would be a small food and beverage option, basically to replace the VFW as a local spot for residents to be able to come and have a drink or have a small meal. Given the size of it, and it's at about 1,250 square feet, we do not have a specific user in mind. Again, it's still a goal, but perhaps it may not be achieved given the size. But overall, it is our intent to provide a commercial space that could be utilized by the local residents as an amenity to the area.
I guess my concern is that 19 parking spaces for even a small coffee shop or a small restaurant is quite a few spaces. And you also have on-street parking on the side street. So, and that wouldn't even impact the residential neighbors. So I guess I would suggest that staff work with you and come up with a more reasonable number, because that could be converted to green space, which would be more of an amenity for the apartment use than the hard surface parking lot. And for drainage purposes and also other purposes, I think it would be much more appropriate. So something I think around 11 or 12 spaces rather than 19. And if you consider that each parking space you take out is about 250 square feet of green space, I think that would be at least a valuable trade-off.
Yes, we would be willing to have that conversation with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Are there other questions of registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing.
Here, I
see one, so I'm Alder Rummel.
Thank you. It takes me a while sometimes to get to that raise hand function. Mr. Burrow, can I was just skimming some of the recent letters, and we definitely have a new cohort that pays attention to the Plan Commission, which I kind of like. Hello, people coming out every meeting we have and talking about sustainability. And presumably you saw them. There's questions about, what kind of efforts the project's making to not only deal with the transportation question, but also the building efficiency and green uses on the roof, et cetera, solar. Did you talk
Yes.
about that and I missed it? If so, can you just say it again?
Yeah, sorry, I did not get to that point in our presentation, but thank you for bringing it up. It is our intention to provide sustainable features on this building. We will be designing the roof to be capable of handling solar panels so that the building is solar ready, should those be added to the project. We will also be providing electrical vehicle charging stations within the basement area so residents can have electrical vehicles. As was typical with this particular developer's projects, we'll be utilizing LED lighting throughout the entire project. We do use Energy Star appliances and do our best to use high efficiency HVAC systems as well. And the building envelope itself will be designed to be thermally efficient, such that we're able to provide a energy efficient building for the residents and the development team as well.
Can you, Mr. Rowe, I feel like I work with you a lot, so I'm going to just ask you a blunt question. You've said this before, and so many representatives for projects say, we're going to build it to be solar ready. What's like the line where you get to where you're like, well, of course we're doing that. That's what everybody does. What takes us to get over that line?
Really, it boils down to the development team and the interest in being able to install this. The systems are becoming more available, that is for sure. But there is a payback period that has to be analyzed. And at this point in the project, we have not gone through that exercise to be able to say for sure whether or not the panels will be installed.
It just seems like something that we're going to have to step up our game soon. So I'll just giving you a heads up. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder. Are there more questions of registrants?
Chair, while we wait for that, I just wanted to quick jump in. I believe there was a registrant not to speak, but somebody registered in opposition for item 7, and I don't believe that was read into the record. Item 7 is the rezoning component of this request.
Okay, Jessica Henderson, 1206 Wind Trail, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak. She did not indicate she would be available to answer questions. Any questions of any of the registrants who are available to answer questions? Seeing none, are there questions? I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Frugal, can you tell me again, so I understand the whole point about changing, we don't need the rezoning to TE, and what will it be? And can you go through that again, just a little more?
Absolutely. It's a bit unusual. As far as the rezoning request, when this proposal was submitted, it was a 5-story building with over 100 units. And the applicant at that time to do the larger project needed to rezone the project to the TE because the TE does allow for more intensive development than the SC district. However, when the project was modified to do a 4-story building with 66 units, that development can occur in the existing zoning, and the rezoning to TE was not necessary. So therefore, to proceed with the development that's before you this evening, the rezoning request is not necessary, and so that therefore staff's recommending that be placed on file without prejudice.
So does that mean this project basically ends here? It doesn't have to go to council if there's no rezoning. Were there any other reasons that would have continued to the council?
Only the rezoning requirement or the rezoning component would have gone on to the common council. It essentially would have been the same conditional uses that the plan commission would have been, and the demolition of the plan commission would have been the final review.
And that's what we're proposing. You're proposing with the recommendation to place on file.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Alder Rummel?
No, not right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, thank you. Policy thing for Mr. Furco. Given our conversation last week about maybe not having this issue of conditional use review for residential uses within certain non-residential exclusive districts, and also of rethinking our demo permit process. Is this something that, if all that happened, would go through by right?
This project, probably not. Based on the discussion that we had last week that you referenced, we didn't talk about the employment districts. This is zoned suburban employment, and at one point was recommended to be zoned to the traditional employment district. Those are essentially districts, and I believe it was one of the speakers that mentioned they're predominantly intended to be employment districts that allow residential. So as far as the discussion we had last week, we were focused on pure residentially zoned districts and then the mixed use districts, but not the employment. Okay. So in that regards, this project would still, barring other changes that we didn't discuss, this project would still have a similar set of review that's before you this evening.
Okay, and do you know what if we went by the parking minimums standards, what a 1,200 square foot coffee shop would require for the, in light of this discussion we just had?
Right. Restaurants and coffee shops, the minimum parking requirement is 15% of the capacity. So we're talking roughly 73 would be the capacity, I believe, that math would work out to. Now, I should note that requirement would only come into play if this development was within 300 feet of another restaurant, bar, or coffee shop. So you have to have both components. You have to be within 300 feet of another similar use for that standard to take place. Otherwise, the zoning code does not have a minimum parking requirement for restaurants.
But it puts you in the ballpark just to have something to go by of what Mr. Cantrell was bringing up, and maybe a third less than what they're proposing. If we had a condition that said that could come back to planning to be worked out, would you have enough to go on there, or is that?
I believe so. Any specificity that the commission could provide in terms of a minimum number of stalls, I believe that Commissioner Cantrella had recommended up to potentially a ballpark of 12 stalls. So any specificity that comes in the motion, it would be appreciated. But yes, we could work with a condition.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I was just going to follow up with the parking question, and I think that it was just answered that if the commission gave staff some direction on a number, say around 12, that they could look at that with the zoning administrator, and if that was adjusted by 2 spaces up or down, that would be fine. But I guess that's what I'm going to be suggesting. So I don't have a question. I think it was just answered. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Are there further questions of staff? Alder Rummel.
I've kind of learned over the years that a lot of things have conditional uses that you don't always notice. And so I don't really deal with the SE district a lot. And now if we're going back to it, has staff looked at all the things that could potentially require an additional conditional use approval with that type of zoning for this project? Or is it ready to go pretty much, nothing new?
The project itself, the one conditional use to do the mixed use building and the 4-story building is the dwelling units in mixed use buildings. But there are a variety of conditional uses in the SE district that you wouldn't find in other mixed use districts, such as the TSS, which I know you have a lot on Willie Street in your district. So there's less flexibility for commercial districts, again, because the district's intended to be employment based. One example would be restaurant or outdoor eating area. If there is a request to do that in the future, that is a separate conditional use application, as would outdoor eating areas, if those would be requested at a future.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions of staff?
Chair, if there aren't questions, there is just a point of I just wanted to mention. Eric Halverson from the Traffic Engineering Division was here if there was questions related to traffic-related issues. And I also wanted to note there was a discussion that I had with the architect prior to the meeting, and it didn't get brought up, I don't believe, in their presentation, but it requested to me looking for flexibility in some of the building materials. Currently, it's a mix of materials, and they were looking for additional flexibility to remove some of the metal panels to do more of a wood composite type siding. And so that wasn't referenced, but I guess I wanted to raise that for the commission because I believe that's the intent. Also note that this is part of UDD 1, and the Urban Design Commission is an approving body on this request. So changes to the architecture of the building would also need to be reviewed by that commission or the secretary if it was viewed minor enough to be a minor alteration in those requests.
So they've approved it without this wood paneling kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. They've approved the plans that are before you
tonight. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Seeing no additional questions of staff, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll recommend that the Plan Commission find the approval standards for the demolition and the conditional use permit met for a new mixed-use building at 120 East Lakeside, and that the Plan Commission forward the rezoning request to the City Council, and that be placed on file without prejudice. And one additional, I guess, condition that staff work with the developer to reduce the size of the at-grade parking lot to approximately 12 spaces, giving the staff some flexibility in determining what exact number should be provided, but I think around 12 spaces. That would provide approximately 1,900 square feet of additional green space, which I think is a good trade-off.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Sundquist. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think this is a very good site for residential development. It's on the edge of a neighborhood, and I think that actually a 5-story building at this location with some additional density and some additional units would have been appropriate as well. And that may have provided the opportunity to provide some additional affordable housing at this location if additional units were provided. But I think that, again, this project I think is a very good one, and it's a good site and close to schools, parks, commercial uses, very walkable, bike trails. So I think it's going to be very successful.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your consideration of this application, and I ask that you support it. I note that there is not anyone showing up in opposition. That was not the case when this project was first proposed. There was a groundswell of opposition. That is another topic for another conversation. I hear what Commissioner Cantrell has just said, that when it comes to density and infill and affordability, sometimes the pushback from neighborhoods means that competing values are held in conflict. Folks don't realize necessarily the economics that when you take a story off a project and reduce it from 5 to 4, it makes providing affordable housing simply uneconomic. But there is no one showing up in opposition to this, principally because the developers met with the neighbors, with the nearby neighbors, and listened to those concerns. They met, by the way, with masks on in a socially distanced manner, but they met in person. They walked the site. They heard what folks had to say. And they came up with essentially what was a compromise. This is on the edge of a neighborhood. It provides a measure of density and infill in a city that desperately needs it. It'll be 66 units of housing, and something that I ask that you would support. We need this in District 13. We need this throughout the city. I also support the concern about parking. I believe the developers overshot the required parking on the second iteration. And I think the idea that there is proximity to transit and access to bicycling, that and their target, their clients and customer base perhaps are people who are looking to live in a part of the city where a car is not necessary. I've suggested to the developers that they consider perhaps a shared car system where they contract with whatever that's called. You know what it is, but you have a couple of those shared cars where people that need to absolutely have a car can sign it out for a day. There are ways that we can move forward as a city with less parking required for developers. So yes, push this back to planning and work with them, provide more green space and less required parking, but please do vote in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Sundquist.
So I won't repeat what Commissioner Cantrell or Alder Evers said because I just wanted to add my thanks to Alder Rummels of the folks who are kind of watching over our shoulder about some of these ongoing policy issues, and thank them on the parking. I don't know if we would have done what we're likely to do now with the parking if it hadn't been for a prompt there. So that's super helpful. Also to note that that a lot of this is policy driven, and it would be a little hard for us to go in, as right as it is, to require more reductions, to below 1 stall per unit or something like that, and more TDM measures when we're not on this one, when we're not doing it to the next one that comes along. And so hopefully sooner rather than later, we will have a structure for doing that. And we have a work session coming up next month that I believe is going to touch on transportation land use and may help move the ball forward there. Ditto on the green building stuff. There are a lot of discussions ongoing about how to do that, where we can require and where we're not allowed to by building codes and state preemption and things like that. But those are great points, and we just need to do them by policy rather than sort of fiat one-off deals. So, but thank you again to the folks who raised those issues.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Alder Heck.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Commissioner Sundquist just said, and because frankly, I actually find the amount of underground parking to be too large, but I'm not going to force that issue. If they were to give up 6 or 8 spaces there, they could have a lot more green space, as well as reducing some of the outdoor parking. I hope we can get there eventually policy-wise, but I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Alder. Any? Yes, Mr. Furco.
Thank you. I didn't want to cut anybody off, but I didn't see hands, and I don't have the ability to raise my blue hand as set up tonight. So just a clarification on the motion. One, I didn't note this in my overview, but with the consent agenda, we did send a revised comment from traffic engineering, asked that they delete condition 26, and that was the requirement that a traffic study be provided as a condition of approval. They've taken with the revised proposal, they have removed that. So I just wanted to clarify, one, that was part of the motion, and two, if there are any comments about the materials, I guess I just want to note that for the record going forward. But
I had understood that change and from traffic engineering to be part of the motion, and I see Commissioner Cantrell also nodding to that. I did not see anyone interested in raising the materials question. We do have another commissioner who wants to weigh in, Alder Rummel.
Thank you. This is a great location for new housing. I drive by it. Well, I used to drive by it every day when I drove to work at the Department of Revenue, but and I often looked at that kind of building kind of tucked away thinking, yeah, what's going to come here? So kudos to having a good project going forward. I just want to make, I don't know, something that Alder Evershed made me think about, like, how we get affordable housing. I personally do not believe anymore that adding more height or doing any kind of things like that makes one whit of difference about whether or not a building has affordable units in it. What makes a building have affordable units in it is when there's a concerted effort to provide assistance for housing to be underwritten through a variety of means. And so I think a 5-story building or a 4-story building, it really depends on the developer and the kind of what the package they put together and what kind of extra work they want to do. So I just think we should always remember that just because it's more density doesn't mean it'll be cheaper housing. It'll just be more people paying market rate housing. That's my opinion. But anyway, sidetrack, sorry, but I think this will be a great addition to the neighborhood, and I will support it.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck.
Thank you. In fairness to Mr. Furco, I want to make sure I understand the request that we're not addressing with this motion, and that was to provide a flexibility so that if the developers should choose to go a different path with some portion of the exterior materials, they would then have the avenue to do that by going back to UDC, or could it be administratively approved by UDC? I don't know, and we haven't seen the materials, so I'm not really sure what to do with that.
Mr. Furco.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that was something that I'd hope the applicant would have been able to address in their comments. What I would recommend, at least as an option, because we don't know until we see the details. We oftentimes have material changes. Some are small, some are more significant. And it's usually when we see those decisions, when that process or that decision is made about process, whether this is in keeping with the same design and it's a minor alteration, or if it's a major alteration. In this case, we do have the Urban Design Commission as a co-approving body. So I believe it would be appropriate that we could note that change could be considered as a minor alteration if approved by the UDC, or the UDC secretary would be one option. But again, we haven't seen a revised set of materials. And from a staff standpoint, and just to note from a procedural standpoint, we couldn't approve a minor alteration unless it didn't have the support of both the district alder and the planning division director as a change. And it would need to be found in keeping with the concept and the overall, I would say, overall aesthetic of the existing building. So, I suppose one route would be, if we do nothing, I would say that leaves us kind of in that same subjective role that if it comes in with material differences, then we would evaluate it at a case-by-case basis and whether or not it would be considered a minor alteration. And that would be a discussion that Alder Evers would need to approve and sign on to. I think to be more proactive, you could just note something that staff has the potential to consider this as a minor alteration. Again, I'd say consider it because we haven't seen the details subject to that. So that would be, if nothing is specified in the motion, then I believe it could be considered as a minor alteration. But if you had something more specific to add to the content of the motion.
I mean, doesn't that happen frequently? That things come forward for alterations and it's determined whether it's minor or major. So I guess I'm not seeing that this is anything different, but Alder Heck.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like there are some paths forward if there are some changes proposed. So doesn't seem that necessary. Might be missing something, but that's where I am now.
Any other comments, concerns? Okay, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a hand raised to object. I see no hands raised to object. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on. The next items we will be considering are 11, 12, and 13 to be considered together. Agenda item 11, 60916, creating sections 28.022 through 00450 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of properties located at 617 South Whitney Way and 160 Westgate Mall 10th Alder District from Commercial Center District to Planned Development, General Development Plan, and creating 28.022 through 00451 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of the same from PD GDP Plan Development, General Development Plan District, and PD Specific Implementation Plan District. Agenda item 12, Legistar 60671. Located at 160 Westgate Mall and 617 South Whitney Way, 10th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish Westgate Mall and consideration of a conditional use for development adjacent to a public park pursuant to Section 28.139 of the Zoning Code as part of a planned redevelopment in the Planned Development District zoning. Agenda item 13, Legistar 60678, approving the preliminary plat and final plat of Westgate redevelopment plat on property generally addressed as 617 South Whitney Way and 160 Westgate Mall, 10th Alder District. Okay, we do have a presentation by staff. Mr. Furco, you are up again.
Okay, well, thanks for having me back. As the chair mentioned, we've got three sets of approvals. We've got a rezoning request, we've got a demolition request, a conditional use for development adjacent to a park, and then a preliminary and final plat. All those details are in the staff report and noted on the agenda as well. In summary, the developer proposes to demolish the Westgate Mall and proceed with a phased redevelopment. The first development includes the first phase of development includes up to 464 multi-family dwelling units in 5 different buildings. And that's the part that's before you tonight as a specific implementation. Also before you tonight is the conceptual development of the corner of the site. That's the corner of Tokay and Whitney Way. And the developer is requesting GDP, again, more general approval for the concept of between a 3 and an 8-story building at that corner. Future SIP would come back through the entire process. That would be UDC, Plan Commission, and Common Council when the specifics are that proposal. In effect, this development, GDP sets the table and sets the parameters of what would be allowed in that site. In looking at the plan recommendations for the site, the overall comprehensive plan recommends regional mixed use for the portion of the site under development. Regional mixed use is the most intensive development district outside of the downtown. There is no minimum density requirement, and buildings between 2 and 12 stories are within the recommended height limits for RMU or regional mixed use areas. Staff notes the property to the south, where the existing Hy-Vee grocery store is recommended for community mixed use. Back in 2009, the Midbell Heights Neighborhood Development Plan was recommended. That has more site-specific recommendations for the site. That includes recommending a 6-story building along the frontage and the corner along Whitney and Tokay, and essentially 4-story buildings along the back of the site. More details of that are noted. Staff believes that the approval standards for zoning map amendments, plan developments, demolitions, conditional uses, and preliminary and final plans can be found met with this proposal and recommends approval. There is a few small changes I will note for this item. In the staff report, there are a few small adjustments, I would say corrections. In condition number 1, 1D, this is based on the recommendation of the Urban Design Commission. It said look at moving the pool placement, not pond placement, so pool placement. That's one correction. And the second adjustment that staff recommends, in condition 2, it says the zoning text shall be revised and submitted for final approval by the zoning administrator or designee and the planning division director or designee to include information regarding project phasing and to clarify the heights shall be approved on approved plans. Staff believes the condition should end there and just strike the not to exceed 8 stories, which on further review, staff believes might add some additional confusion. And again, that would be more typical with other language. So those are the recommended changes in there. I will also note that Eric Halverson is again with us from traffic engineering if questions related to traffic's areas of expertise come up during the questions for staff. Otherwise, I will be available after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furco. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, 7601 University Avenue, Middleton, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Mr. Burrow.
All right, good evening again, everyone. And thank you for allowing us to present this project to you. This is basically the culmination of the redevelopment of the Westgate Mall property. The redevelopment initially started a few years ago with the Hy-Vee grocery store that went into place and is now providing an artery of commercial use for this space with a variety of uses within that building. So what we're looking at adding now is the housing portion of this mixed-use development in various phases and sizes of buildings. You can go to the first slide, please. So the overall layout, what we have before you is a multi-phase development with the intention of utilizing the northeast corner for phase 1 with a 153 4 to 5 story apartment building, which would have a pool located in the courtyard area of that. And then additional phases would continue along this, with phase 2 being the workforce housing project located against the proposed green space between Hy-Vee and our property. Next, and also senior housing located along Whitney Way in 1 or 2 buildings to be constructed there. And then phase 3 would be a culmination of an additional market rate building in the middle of the space. And ultimately phase 4 would be the commercial clinic medical office building located on the northwest corner of the property. Next slide, please. What we're proposing to do here is provide additional green space and connectivity for this neighborhood such that the residents would have access directly up to the Odana School Park, which is located directly to the east of our property, and also creating that outdoor public green space available between the workforce housing building and the Hy-Vee space, which is shown in the middle here. We will also be providing a public art amenity space at the end of the main drive coming in off of Whitney Way. Next slide, please. Here's some perspective views of the overall development where you get a bird's eye view looking down from Tokay Boulevard with Hy-Vee being in the background there. You can see the variety of size of the buildings from 5-story stepping down to 4-story as they go down the hill. And the other 4-story senior housing building. And then we've got the box shown for the GDP for the medical office building. Next slide, please. Again, additional views looking back at the overall development. Next slide. Views of the screen space where you can see the public art amenity in the foreground. Next slide. Here's a closer up view of what that green space would have to offer with outdoor seating available, which could be utilized by patrons of Hy-Vee and also the residents of this area. Next slide. The private street that we're creating with the intention of creating a nice place-making space where we've got outdoor seating available for the residents. Next slide, please. Again, a view up that street. Next slide. Here you can see the public benches, bike parking, generous lawn, street terrace with street trees as well. Next slide, please. Additional views looking at the housing aspect of the property. Next slide.
Mr. Burrow, that concludes your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Jacob Klein, South Park Street, Madison Support, wishing to speak, representing JT Klein Company.
Yeah, thank you, Plan Commission. I just wanted to say we appreciate your consideration of this project. We've spent the last 8 months working with the neighborhood, the alder, and staff. This project means a lot to me as I grew up not too far away from there. And, you know, having gone to school, grown up in Madison, and seen the decline of the mall over the years, it's always been in my mind that would be a really great project to do here on the near west side. So we're really excited about bringing this much needed, affordable senior and market rate housing to the west side, and would appreciate your guys' approval tonight.
Thank you. The next registrant wishing to speak is Melissa Huggins, 807 East Johnson Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Jacob Klein. Ms. Huggins.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to skip to slide 15, which is the traffic impact analysis, if possible. Just wanted you to note that we've done extensive study to understand how this will impact the surrounding neighborhood. And obviously, when Westgate was at its fullest, things were very busy, and there were over 7,000 weekly day trips. With the housing, I'm focusing on the housing now, we anticipate about 2,100 new daily trips with 135 to 170 AM and PM peak, respectively. The parking supply meets demand, so there are no questions there. And staff, the development team in working with PE is recommending reconstruction of the main entrance to Whitney Way to restrict the left that turns south on Whitney Way, but so it'll be right in, right out, and then left in. Eliminating one of the driveways that is closest to Tokay, and then relocating the Tokay access point to the east, and then maintaining the movement. Next slide, please. Understanding that the Plan Commission is very interested in having a TDMP, we have provided one, if albeit a little bit late because this was new to us. But some of the assumptions that go into the TDMP relate to the fact that it's designed to meet a 20% reduction in trips, mainly because the age-restricted units already bring that down by 10%. And then private vehicle ownership is lower in affordable housing projects. So in terms of the TDMP, there'll be unbundled parking. We've got great access to bike paths and bike lanes, great access to transit, especially when BRT comes through, and good neighborhood walkability. And obviously, in terms of essential services between the Hy-Vee and the commercial uses across Whitney Way, we are well served. And then the last thing is that when new residents move into the into the housing, they will be offered the option to receive a 10-pack of Metro bus passes. So that is also in place. And then finally, next slide. Sustainability. It will be built to exceed 200 points on the Wisconsin Green Build Checklist. There will be solar instituted, LED lighting, Energy Star. The HVAC system will be very efficient, low flow water valves, high efficiency building envelope. And then we are hoping to crush and recycle the very substantial Westgate Mall building that is there. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Okay, I will read the rest of the registrants into the record. Bruce Holler from Westward Way, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing J.T. Klein. John Olson, Caldy Place, opposed, not wishing to speak. Harold Sabot, Nokomis Court, Madison, neither support nor opposed, not wishing to speak. Andrew Hansen, Yuma Drive, support, not wishing to speak. Julia De Palma, Radcliffe Drive, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak. Andrew Hansen, support from Yuma Drive, Madison, not wishing to speak. And finally, John, I think we might have had him before. John Olson, Caldy Place, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak. He registered for two of the items being considered together. Okay, that is all the Mr. Furco?
I have one additional one on my list here, and I'll just read it into the record.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Gail Schaefer on item 13, registered in opposition and not wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it'd be for Mr. Burrow or Mr. Klein or both. Well, it looks very attractive to me, but my takeaway was it's all the same height. And can you tell me what you thought about height? And is there like plans that, maybe I didn't study all the details to say this should be this is the height and that's what you're doing. But it just kind of, the buildings look nice, but it sort of seems all the same. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that. Thanks.
I can speak to that. This is Kevin Burrow. With regards to the height, we're starting out as a transition from a 5-story building along Tokay Boulevard, stepping down to a 4-story building. Something that's deceiving in a lot of the perspective views is the fact that there is a fair amount of changing grade across the property from Tokay heading south towards the existing Hy-Vee store, such that each of the additional buildings are 4-story, but the grade continuously steps down such that none of the parapets are at the exact same height for any of the building. These are all predominantly 4-story buildings due to the cost effectiveness of construction means and methods, to be able to do underground parking below the buildings and then be able to construct a reasonable price building above that in a 4-story format.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Sundquist.
Thank you. And this is for the development team also, maybe Ms. Huggins, because it's a lot about transportation, but whomever. First, really a lot of great things about this. So this is not to undercut the great parts of it, but a couple of questions. On the TDMP, you guys make a lot about the affordability, the senior living as a way to reduce the trips, and I think that is legitimate to me. But if it is part of the TDM plan, that's going to, is my understanding is that's going to live as a condition of approval, and so you wouldn't be able to come back 3 years later and make it all market or something like that. Is that the understanding of the proposer?
So I think one thing to understand, Commissioner, is that the funding for these projects, so the 4% tax credits that are going to be used for the senior housing, and then the 9% tax credits are going to be used for the some of the family housing. There's a 30-year requirement that they remain affordable. So I don't know. I mean, of course, we can't crystal ball it, but I would hope that when we have BRT and as we grow as a community, that we would be moving towards transit and not need to come back to ask for to not have adequate parking, and the trip reductions would remain. Is my hope.
So good point on the financing, but I mean, this could be in effect 100 years from now. So, but that's everybody's cool with that. It sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know how we figure that out. I mean, that's a great point. But for 30 years, these buildings will remain affordable, and I guess it'll be future plan commissions that will have to figure that out, and future staff. But Kevin will be around by then; he'll still be there, so he can figure it out.
Yeah. And one of the measures is the unbundled parking, which we've been championing in other places, and I'm glad that you guys came forward with a straightforward statement on that, as opposed to some other projects. So and it makes sense to me that you wouldn't kick that in until maybe you were fully rented. I guess that's the intent of the first year, not enforcing that.
Yeah.
But I assume that you're going to let people know when they move in that that's coming, right? So it's not a bait quick sort of thing that they stay there more than a year.
I would defer to Jacob. Jacob, I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, the way that it's set up is as part of the lease. There's a parking. They sign a parking addendum as a supplemental document. That's part of the lease paperwork they sign, and then they're given a concession of 1 year of parking. So that there's a separate form for that concession. So they're signing two pieces. They're signing two essentially addendums, acknowledging that they're getting parking free for a year.
Thank you. And then, how does that work with your rent limits under your financing? When you charge separately for the parking, do you have to stay under the total limit for parking and quote unquote rent, or is it a way to get above the limit?
Well, that's a great question. And so the IRS Section 42 regulations are, if you include the parking garage in the basis of the building for claiming tax credits, you are not allowed to charge for parking. And so in all the buildings, we have taken the cost of the parking garage out of the basis of the building. So we are able to charge for parking going forward.
Okay. And then finally, on the sustainable, this is also transportation, but glad to see the solar and the efficiency green building stuff. Will there be, and maybe this was in here, I had trouble downloading some of the materials, I apologize, but will there be any EV charging available on the site?
Yeah, we've typically put, depending on the size of the building, 1 to 2 stalls in each building. And so we would plan on doing that here as well.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Commissioner Sundquist took care of some of my questions, but just a few random questions for the development team. The 30 kilowatts of solar, is that spread across all of the buildings that we're currently considering in the in the plan, and I assume those are, regardless, I assume those are going to be providing electricity for common areas only, correct?
Correct. So there's 2 senior affordable buildings and 1 workforce affordable building. So there's 3 buildings that will for sure have individual 30 kilowatt systems on the roof. And that just, yes, it just spins back the common meter.
So it's not cumulative across the buildings. It's 30 kilowatts on at least 3 of the buildings.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Speaking of stormwater, there's mention in the staff report about your submission went in before the new stormwater ordinance was enacted. Are you making any effort to meet the new stormwater retention requirements, despite the fact that your submittal was after that?
Chair, can you unmute Bruce Morrow, and he can speak to that? Bruce Holler, rather. Bruce Holler.
Okay, Bruce Holler. Okay. Mr. Holler?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we had submitted it prior to the ordinance taking effect, but throughout the public meetings and throughout the whole my design, we are going to shoot for meeting the current, the updated stormwater requirements for the site as it relates to redevelopment.
And would you be comfortable with a condition of approval stating such?
Yes.
Thank you. That's encouraging. I'm curious about the swimming pool in the market rate building. Looks nice. Is that only for the people in the market rate building to use?
Jacob, can you speak to that?
Mr. Burrow?
Jacob Klein can answer this.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to get unmuted there. So no, that, all the buildings are, controlled access. And so the pool is just for the market rate building. And the market rate building next door will have access to the amenities in that building as well, because it's kind of designed as a single phase, to be operated as a single phase as soon as the second 79 units built. So the exercise room is oversized for the project, and the community room is oversized based on the 223 units or whatever it is.
Okay, thanks. One more question that's perhaps more complicated. There were discussions in some of the comments in the several neighborhood meetings that were organized related to the lack of commercial space in the development. And I understand, there are some reasons for that. And then I also heard you earlier, somebody on your team mentioned that perhaps some of the commercial development in the Hy-Vee structure sort of make up for the lack of commercial space in the new development. Can you kind of describe your reasoning for, is that sufficient? And what's your rationale other than you don't think you can fill your commercial space?
Is that a Mr. Klein question?
I think so.
Okay, could you please unmute Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein needs to be unmuted. Okay, good. Mr. Klein.
Well, I think the whole COVID-19 has really thrown, some financial chaos into having first floor commercial space in a mixed use building. Hy-Vee, before we entered into a contract to purchase the property, recorded several covenants and restrictions against uses that are what you would typically see on the first floor of a building like that. And so, there's no restaurants without Hy-Vee approval, no coffee shops, basically anything that would compete at all with the store is restricted. And so, we've got a lot of affordable housing here. Really, the only building that I think would have had the potential to have any first floor space would be the senior building along Whitney. And, given the climate we're in, it's just going to be very difficult to finance a first floor commercial space in a tax credit building because the just underwriting restrictions have gotten so much tighter. So what we have done to kind of address that is we've activated the first floor space around Whitney to make it look like it's a commercial and put our community room, beauty salon, fitness center to keep the space activated.
And will those restrictions that on commercial space apply to the other parcel where you're considering putting a tower, a clinic, and a taller building with a clinic and things? Would those same restrictions apply to the first floor of that building?
Yes.
Okay. I think those are my questions for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm very excited to see this development proposal. As a frequent visitor to this site, I appreciate that this is happening. So with that, I wanted to ask, I think, Melissa about some of the left turns. And I think anybody who goes to this location, to this space, understands the challenges of kind of getting to that location. And I just wanted to look over some of those left turn proposals.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Commissioner Spencer. We were concerned when TE initially wanted. I mean, one of the recommendations that came out of our TIA was that it was going to be a signaled intersection, and TE does not believe that it's warranted yet. And they also, based on the stacking along Whitney Way and the traffic volume, did not believe that we could maintain a left out onto Whitney Way South. And initially, we thought that Hy-Vee would have a problem with that, but they do not. And so, I think we've settled on the right in, right out, left in as being an okay solution, given that there are other ways out of the site on Odana and Seago.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then, as I'm sure Jacob can say, I remember when this mall was more actively used. I think I went to many movies there and to Rocky Rococo's. But I also remember a lot of people walking in the mall. It was a nice place to walk. It had carpeted floors and whatnot. And so I'm hoping that there's still spaces for people to walk around for sure in the summer. But what about the winter? Are there places to get a couple laps in for people who are inside? I guess that goes to anybody.
Ms. Huggins, is that one?
Sure, I can jump into that. Yeah, mall walking, I think, is one of those things that we have to let go of because eventually all the malls will be gone. Fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on your perspective, right? But I think that in terms of during the better months here in Wisconsin, this project is creating a really good connection to Odana School Park. And that has always been something that has been included. And so the development team is working closely with park staff to make sure that connection is really strong. And I think also, just generally, if you think about how the project will fit into the neighborhood with regards to sidewalks and bike paths and things like that. I think that instead of kind of being this monolith sitting in the middle of a large expanse of parking, it will be a much more activated space. As for the winter months, I don't know. I think we're going to have to look for those things that we all have to do going forward to get some exercise on the indoors when the months are bad.
Thank you, Ms. Huggins. Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Spencer?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Alder Hennick.
Yes, I just have a few comments, if now would be a good time to present those.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much for your service to the city and the effort you put into reviewing the Westgate Mall proposal. It's been a significant period of time that the neighborhood and myself have been working on this with city staff. The neighborhood has been hoping for the redevelopment of this area for over a decade. Many were hoping for a redevelopment offering services to the community and public amenities where the people would gather, providing an anchor to the uniquely transit-oriented location on the west side of Madison. This location's ability to support significant density, possibly 8 to 10 stories, and the affordable housing our city needs is unique. I do not see this plan as bringing this unique west side hub what the area really desires because of a lack of retail space offerings, public amenities, and density. However, looking at the district and close surrounding area along with the current economic environment, this plan is over 460 units of almost 700 units currently proposed for the greater Westgate area. The plan provides a diverse mix of affordable housing, market rate, and senior housing, diversifying the significant influx of units in the area. Plans underway to make sure that park impact fees are utilized to improve park amenities, as well as anticipate traffic management infrastructure needs. The development team has navigated public input in a dynamic manner. 4 neighborhood meetings were held, with 1 being virtual. A website was also developed to keep residents up to date on development progress throughout COVID. Thank you to Urban Assets for being available and responsive to feedback and recommendations of residents. Not that many of them were significantly implemented due to a number of different challenges, but residents always felt like they were able to ask questions and get responses, even if they weren't the ones that they wanted. I think that there's a lot of things that residents wanted that they don't see in this plan, but there are also a lot of really significant benefits to the area that are provided with this plan, especially given the current situation. So I think that there's both sides, and I'm excited to hear the discussion that's going on tonight, and I hope that you consider that in the proposal. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions of process or some of the different recommendations or questions asked by residents.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions of our registrants before I close our public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Sundquist.
This is Eric Halverson still here?
Yes. Could you unmute Eric Halverson, please?
He is not in the attendee list.
He's staff.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Eric, you should have a problem.
Okay.
Okay, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to double check because we had a sidebar conversation on the TDM plan, and what I understood from the conversation tonight, and what I think I'm reading is that the unbundled parking kicks in after the project's been built for a year, not as I think we were discussing after the individuals had been living there for a year. Is that correct?
I would ask that of the management team. That's what it sounded like to me. In their TDM plan, it does say unbundled parking, not unbundled after every new tenant, so I believe I was mistaken, but
Okay.
I'm still not 100% sure.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that that's what they said, but Chair Zellers, would you allow them to respond?
With the agreement of the commission, I will reopen the public hearing to allow that question to be answered. Ms. Huggins, is that one for you?
Sure, I can start, but I would like Jacob to be able to weigh in. Ultimately, it's just this first year that it will be attached. They will be able to get parking when they enroll, but I do not think that going forward that will remain. Is that correct, Jacob?
Yeah, and it's just for the affordable units. So the market rate units pay for parking day one.
Okay, but like a year from opening, that applies to everybody, correct?
Mr. Klein?
When you say a year, you mean they have to start paying for parking a year from opening? Is that the question?
Yes, in the affordable units, when the unbundled parking provision kicks in after 1 year, correct?
Yeah, I mean it's always unbundled, but basically we're giving a concession on it. So they would start paying for it at their renewal, or if somebody moved out, the next tenant coming in would pay for it. Does that?
Yeah, and they would pay for it like on the first day. If they move in 2 years from now, there's not any more grace period.
Correct.
Okay, that was the confusion, and so thank you for clearing that up.
Okay. With that, then I will again close the public hearing. Commissioner Sundquist, did you have any further questions? No. Any other questions of staff? I do not see any raised hands for questions of staff, so I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the rezoning of the 9.552 acres at 160 Westgate Mall and 617 South Whitney Way from CC to plan development, approving the general development plan and the specific implementation plan for those properties. Secondly, that the Plan Commission find that the standards of approval for the demolition and the conditional use permits have been met. And lastly, that the Plan Commission find that the standards of approval for the preliminary and final plats for the Westgate redevelopment are approved, and recommend that to the City Council.
Is there
with a couple suggested changes as recommended by staff on condition number 1 and 2. And I think that Alder Heck had a suggested amendment, and I think that it was that the development would meet the new stormwater standards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so you are adding that in also, Commissioner?
Yes, if that's what the intent was, yes.
Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Solheim? Okay. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Sure. I think this is an excellent redevelopment for Westgate. And again, I visited the site a lot, going to movies and TJ Maxx and all the other commercial uses that were in the mall there. But I think that this is what we can expect to see of our older malls, and hopefully East Town and West Town will redevelopment with a very dense development in the future. I do think in the future we're going to see the frontage of Whitney Way that that fronts Hy-Vee redevelopment with some sort of commercial restaurant uses, because their parking lot is much larger than what they need. So I think we're going to see some infill development there. But this project, I think, is very good, and this is exactly where we need housing and where we have transit and future BRT. So I'm very happy to see this move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. This is, I've been on the council for a while, and this has been before us as a topic for over a decade. I just kind of had a flashback to 2009 when that whole planning process was underway. And of course, the plan at the time was a lot more mixed use and aggressively so. And so it's a reminder that plans capture a moment in time, because now we're seeing with COVID and just the pressure on retail, this isn't, and even the pressure because of the types of proposed uses, that might not be the future for this parcel. But I think it's got a really strong anchor. And if Commissioner Cantrell's, I think, spot on about that corner being it should be considered a node. And of course, there's stuff across the street, which isn't before us. So, there's still a commercial presence there. But I think I just wanted to say out loud, I will miss TJ Maxx, because that's why I, as an East Sider, I would go over there and I can still go to the Antique Mall, but I will miss TJ Maxx. And bringing Hy-Vee was a game changer. It just took longer to change the game than we first thought. So, but this is great. Congratulations to the team.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Solheim.
First of all, Alder Rummel, don't fear. TJ Maxx has just moved across the street, so you can still go. But I just wanted to express my support for this project. It's really good to see it move forward. I love to see the mix of affordability and market rate, as well as senior and family. We don't have nearly enough affordable housing recently on the west side, so it's really nice to see this. There's not commercial, but there's a lot of commercial in the surrounding area, so that doesn't really worry me for this specific parcel. I understand the challenges of that. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the architecture team. I think it can be really hard to plan for multiple buildings on the same site and make them look different, but still fit in together. And I think they did that here. It looks really nice and like a good place to live. So I'm looking forward to supporting this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Excuse me. Before we move forward. Yes, Mr. Furco.
I wanted to just note a note of caution on the condition related to the stormwater requirements. I certainly understand the intent of what Alder Heck was going for. I just have some concerns with that kind of broad of a comment. Typically, we don't require additional standards for stormwater that's above and beyond what the requirement is. I understand there's a timing issue here. And I guess I have a few concerns that, there's many different requirements, and kind of as broadly as it's stated right now, this would indicate that if there's some component of that new ordinance that isn't being met, even though the developer stated their intent to comply with the ordinance, I guess I'm looking, I guess I would suggest that we have a bit more flexibility, recognizing that the developers agreed to that intent. So I'm wondering if you would be amenable to amending that condition. I've got some suggested language if you would be willing to entertain
that. Commissioner Sundquist.
Well, I wasn't going to speak to that, but I'll say my little piece, and then others can deal with that. But I agree with everything that Commissioner Solheim and Trell and others have said, Alder Rummel. I think, it would have been great. And also congratulations to Alder Hennick for working this out. Such a large development that seems to be amenable to all the neighbors. I mean, normally you would see a lot of folks come and have maybe differing opinions about it. So congrats there. I these last two things are really pretty exciting. A fair amount of new housing, a lot of it affordable, not on the isthmus, which is nice, but in transit-served areas. So, yay team! This is great. I will put a little note of caution on what might happen in front of the Westgate Mall, or I mean, in front of the Hy-Vee. I think it is going to be a challenge to develop that as a node while roads are so auto-oriented and highway looking and highway centric. Even more of a challenge as WSDOT is going to do shoulder running and expand the capacity of the Beltline. And potentially have more traffic coming and going along those exits. So I've tried to walk across that intersection before, and it's not very nodey as far as that goes. So we still have work to do on that, and not to go too much down that rabbit hole. I know that our Department of Transportation is aware of that and has even got some plans for maybe doing a road diet on Odana Road, but those two things have to go together before we'll get the real sort of nice infill that we're thinking about there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I just wanted to note that I'm open to suggestions on relaxing a little bit the requirement that they follow the new stormwater ordinance, and any suggestions that Mr. Furco has are fine with me. I did have one other thing to note, though, and I don't know if Alder Hennick is still
yes.
available.
Well,
I'm curious about. It is true that we didn't get a lot of neighbors weighing in on this, although there were extensive public engagement components that we read about in Legistar. But the neighborhood associations themselves, and I understand there were several neighborhood associations involved, didn't ever weigh in. And I wonder if it was just so non-controversial that the neighborhood associations didn't engage to a substantial degree, or people just wanted to do it individually.
Alder Hennick, did you want to comment on that?
Yes. So we talked about doing a steering committee, but we did have meetings with every single one of the neighborhood associations. So they were participating in this process throughout the time that this was going through. So we had significant participation from each of the neighborhood associations. It wasn't non-controversial. There was definitely controversy over parking, over additional traffic. And I think I highlighted some of that in my comments, that there's definitely pushback on additional developments and additional dwellings that we worked with traffic engineering on, and we you can only do so much on some of those aspects, but and there was definitely a request for less density. There was a number of residents that felt it was far too dense. So those voices definitely came out, and that was what I was trying to express in the first portion of it. That people didn't see the anchor that they wanted to see. So those are some of the considerations that we definitely discussed with the developer, but due to various reasons, it wasn't something that the type of project that the developer was willing to consider.
I think you make a good point, and I'll accept your email and input as the report of the neighborhood associations. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Both Alders. Anything else, Alder Heck? Nope. Mr. Furco, could you let us know what you think would be appropriate language to get at the goal of the commission in regard to stormwater?
I've got some draft language. I'll give it a shot. Let me know if this is close or if you'd like to see some refinements. But the language that I would propose at this time, the development team has indicated that the project will be designed to meet the city's updated stormwater ordinance. Recognizing this commitment, the Plan Commission encourages that these standards be met, with the final details to be approved by the city engineer and or their designee.
Is there someone who is willing to make a motion to amend the Commissioner Cantrell?
I'll make a motion to amend my original amendment to the motion as Kevin Ferkel has indicated.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Alder Rummel. Any discussion about the amendment? We will first vote on the amendment. Seeing no raised hands, I will assume unanimous consent on the amendment unless someone raises their hand to object. Seeing none, we're to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. I do not see a raised hand to object. Okay, that then concludes our meeting, other than if there's any business by members. Any business by members? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Seconded by Alder Heck. I will assume unanimous consent unless there's a raised hand to object. Thank you all very much. And I will see you on August, I think it is 24th.
Okay, good night.
Good night.